Japan has just made what many analysts call the biggest strategic shift since the end of World War II. Tokyo is officially loosening decades-old defense restrictions, opening the door for the export of warships, radar systems, missiles, and advanced military technology overseas. A nation once constrained by its pacifist constitution is now rapidly transforming into a new defense powerhouse in Asia. For decades, the world associated the label "Made in Japan" with Toyota cars, Sony TVs, and Canon cameras. But from 2026 onward, that same label could appear on destroyers, advanced radar systems, and high-tech missile platforms sold to countries stretching from Southeast Asia to Europe. According to SIPRI, global military spending in 2025 surpassed $2.4 trillion, the highest level in human history. Japan alone has raised its defense budget to nearly $59 billion, with plans to push military spending toward 2% of GDP by the end of the decade. This signals that Tokyo no longer wants to remain merely the economic backbone of the Western alliance. As the United States becomes increasingly tied down in Ukraine and the Middle East, America's weapons stockpiles are showing signs of strain. Thousands of artillery shells, Patriot systems, and air defense missiles continue flowing into conflict zones, causing growing concern among U.S. allies in Asia about Washington's long-term ability to guarantee regional security. For Japan, this has created a once-in-a-generation strategic opportunity. One of the most symbolic moves is Tokyo's plan to transfer Abukuma-class destroyer escorts to the Philippines. Although these ships have served in the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force for over 30 years, they still possess formidable anti-submarine and anti-ship warfare capabilities. Each vessel displaces around 2,000 tons and is equipped with torpedoes, naval guns, and anti-ship missiles. For the Philippines, a country historically lacking major surface combat ships, this represents more than a military upgrade. It is a dramatic leap in naval capability. Philippine defense officials have openly stated that Japanese military hardware will strengthen Manila's deterrence power and help secure its interests in the South China Sea. But the real story goes far deeper than weapons sales. For decades, Japan's defense industry operated under severe restrictions. Giants like Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Kawasaki Heavy Industries possessed world-class military technology, yet lacked export markets. Their products were built only in limited quantities for domestic use, driving prices to extremely high levels. Now, with export barriers falling, Japan's defense industry is preparing for explosive growth. Missile factories, radar production lines, UAV programs, and shipyards are expected to scale up massively, reducing costs while boosting Tokyo's competitiveness in the global arms market. Several defense analysts believe Japan's arms exports could eventually generate tens of billions of dollars annually if Tokyo succeeds in expanding sales across ASEAN and Europe. However, behind these commercial deals lies a far more ambitious geopolitical strategy. Look closely at the countries Japan is targeting: the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others. Nearly all sit along the so-called First Island Chain, the strategic line considered critical for containing China's naval expansion in the Western Pacific. Tokyo understands that if Beijing gains full control over the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, Japan's vital shipping lanes for energy and trade could face enormous pressure. That is why Japan's military exports are not simply about profit. By supplying radar systems, patrol ships, and advanced defense equipment to Southeast Asian nations, Tokyo is effectively building a forward defensive perimeter designed to counterbalance China's growing influence. More importantly, modern weapons are not ordinary consumer products. When a country purchases Japanese radar systems, warships, or defense technology, it becomes dependent on Japanese spare parts, maintenance, software updates, training, and military data networks for decades. In other words, Japan is not merely selling weapons, it is building an entire military ecosystem tied closely to its allies. If Japanese radar systems deployed in the Philippines detect suspicious naval activity in the South China Sea, that intelligence can potentially integrate directly into the broader U.S. Japan security network. Over time, Regional militaries become increasingly interconnected with the strategic architecture led by Tokyo and Washington. This may represent the most dramatic transformation of Japan since 1945. A nation once defined by post-war pacifism is now rapidly rearming, expanding its military influence, and positioning itself as a major geopolitical force in Asia. The biggest question now is this. Is Japan simply defending itself against rising security threats, or is it quietly preparing to become a new global military power in the emerging world order?